Love
Okay, here we
it.
go.
It's
Okay, so I'm so excited because I am here with Kimberly Snyder, who is, we're basically best friends and we just met like 3 seconds ago, which is
ah,
like, just my kind of vibe. It's my
oh
kind of
yeah.
vibe.
Drop right in, drop all the pretense. Love and connection is right here.
Who has
So it's
time for anything else?
no, it's all
Truth and
surface.
authenticity is just like, it's not even my love language. I say that, but it's actually like my life fuel.
It's, getting caught up in all the like the little small stuff. I feel like it dissipates so much energy, right? And
Right.
it's just like we're here. Let's get in. Let's get into the value. Let's share.
And I took the test and it said I'm an extrovert, but I'm not, because when I talk about meaningless things, it really drains me. But when I
Yeah.
talk about things like your delicious book, You Are More Than You Think You Are, Practical Enlightenment for Everyday Life, I think this is somebody I'd like to be friends with.
Oh,
So
wonderful.
do a quick, I obviously did your bio in our intro, but do like a little quick, what a book. What a book. How'd you
Thank you.
get there? What a book.
Oh, it's been a really gritty, raw, beautiful, crazy journey for the past 10 years. So the funny thing, Molly, is this is the sixth book in 10 years. And I look back on that first book when I just got back from backpacking around the world, and I still didn't really know exactly what I was going to do, but I actually wrote a manuscript called Catching the Fire. And it was a
Mhm.
travel memoir, and it had some of the teachings in this book. And then at that time, I had just gone back. I started a free WordPress blog and I was teaching yoga. I was going back to nutrition school. And my first publisher, HarperCollins, and my first editor, Sarah, looked at my stuff and she's like, well, she's like, the food and the recipe stuff seems to be really taking off. So why don't we do a food book first? And then we'll do this book second. So the funny thing is that book was called The Beauty Detox Solution, which grew and grew. And then the second book was a food book primarily. But then the third book, I started going back into this more holistic, expansive, how everything's connected. So the third book was about our chakras and our energy. And then the fourth book was with Deepak Chopra, which was
Right.
Ayurveda and spirituality. Fifth book was mind body connection. But this one, Molly, feels like my full playbook. Like this is really what I know will help so many people unblock themselves, find that creativity, that abundance, that love inside of themselves. So
Yeah.
I'm glad
It's
it
a,
didn't happen 10 years ago. I wasn't
well,
gritty enough to write it yet.
yeah, I think that's true. And I think the other thing about this book is it's dense. Like, I read it and I need to read it like a lot of, there's a lot in you really nailed a lot of different points, which I think is incredible. And also in my research of you, which I would love to talk about, but not today. Like I'm very, actually, maybe I do want to talk about today, but like me, I'm very obsessed with your relationship with Deepak Chopra, because it sounds to me like it was just about bravery, wasn't it? You were just like, you're going to know me, Deepak Chopra. And you just kept on calling them. And then it like changed your whole life.
So I think, and I talk about this in several chapters in the book, Molly. There's a chapter on magnetism
Mm.
where we go from, again, everything in our lives transforms from the inside out. So again, in the base of the book is about living life from your true self versus this outer shell and the ego. So I think with everything, so much of our suffering comes from living life here. So
Mhm.
it's what we look like, what we're doing, what we're sensing with our five senses. So basically our peripheral nervous system, looking out in the world, sensing things. So the reason that a lot of us struggle with abundance and creating magic is we're looking out here and then we're trying to reverse that flow. Like this looks awesome, or here's what's trending. Why don't I jump on that bandwagon? Or here's someone I want to connect to. Let me hammer them. And the difference is when I went to connect with Deepak, when I was looking to do all of this stuff, it was like going beyond the doing. And it was
Mm.
getting to that real 0 point stillness inside. So the true self is this formless part of us. It's this energy that's stable, that's infinitely intelligent and creative and courageous, like you said. So we can all access it. It's free. It's available to each and every single one of us, but it's more than that persistence. It's more than that. It's coming from this super aligned place where we come from this place of expansion instead of getting out of the primal fear of the ego. We change our frequency, and there's science to this. It's not woo woo. We come from this different place so that when we show up, when I'm in a conversation with Deepak for the first time, he can tell that there is real purpose behind my words. He can tell also that I'm coming from this expanded place where it's not just about me, but hey, I really want to share this. I really want to help people. I really want to work with allness, with the collective. And so it's more than just being courageous, Molly. I think that's a part of it. I think, when we get aligned, we do want to speak our truth, but it's about connecting to this flow. Like I feel like when I got back from my around the world trip, the only way I can describe it is I felt like I was starting to apply these teachings that I had learned about in India that I'm sharing now for the first time. And it felt like I was going into this flow where it wasn't this arduous pushing, but more was coming. So it's like there's this flow underneath everything. Yogananda, who brought yoga to the West from the East, he talks about this underlying energy matrix. So once we get out of ego and fear and just obsessing with what we see, we can start to work with the wave of energy underneath. And this connects us to all parts of our body and beyond, to all people and to all things. So then we can start to harness that energy and more opportunities come.
Yeah.
It sounds a little esoteric, but you'll see in the book, it's very prescriptive.
Well, it does sound esoteric, which always bothers me because it bothers me because I'm like you. And I mean, you know what they say, those who are spiritual never choose to be spiritual. We always hit some kind of bottom and then have to recreate our belief system. And I guess I am always worried. I always bring my sickest self to every interview, right? I bring the 325-pound, angry, hopeless, whose vision was the size of a very thin hallway to the conversation. And I wonder what you say to her about, first of all, she doesn't know what magnetism is, right? She doesn't even know what abundance is. And it's like, I want to get on what you're saying, but I don't even see, it's like a big highway and I don't even see how to get to your side. So what would you say to someone who's like, what do you mean by magnetism? What does that even mean?
Okay, so what's exciting about this book is it's not just information, it's experiential. So why don't you like that lovely, amazing soul that you're describing, anyone listening to this, let's just take a 20-second journey on experiencing, okay? So just if you're driving, keep your eyes open, but if not, just close your eyes for a moment.
Or maybe just like pull over.
And what we're doing here, pull over. So we're talking about, first of all, getting to this point of the true self is this real like stable resource inside of us. And so we experience that when we experience stillness. But you can say, when are we really still, right? The thoughts are always going, we're always doing. So what the Vedic philosophy teaches us is that we can start to experience this true stillness in the tiny micropause in between the inhales and exhales. And once we experience it, we touch it, and it means that it starts to expand. So it means we become in our lives more and more coming with real power instead of reactivity. It means we're pulling from that deeper place of solutions, higher wisdom, higher knowing. And just in 20 seconds, you can learn to access that place inside of you. So take a deep breath in, close your eyes, take a deep breath out. And now you're going to inhale for a count of 4 on my count. So inhale, 2, 3, 4, and then pause at the top. So keep the breath in your lungs, nice and calm. And now exhale for 4, 2, 3, 4. Pause empty at the bottom. And then inhale, 2, 3, 4, and pause full at the top. Exhale, 2, 3, 4. Pause empty at the bottom. And then inhale. And start going back into your normal breath, taking big inhales and exhales. So what you'll find, you can float your eyes open, is inside of us is this potential to go into stillness, to go beyond mind chatter, to go beyond thought. And so like you, Molly, I love Eckhart Tolle. I love some of these, big thinkers, but then it was like, well, how do I do that? How do I get into the now?
And what do I do if during that exercise, all my brain said to me was, "You're terrible. I hate you. I hate this. You can't do any." Like, what do we say about that? Like, if there's so much, and so the podcast is about like what we're really
Yeah.
craving. It's like if we're really deep in like this self-hating, self-harming behavior, how do we override that to
Yes.
get to the like, listen, I'm with you. Like that place exists that you're talking about, but it's like, how do I get there if I can't even breathe without the chatter screaming violently at me?
So there's two ways we get there, and and again, the Vedic science, the Bhagavad Gita is very specific. We need two parts to get out of this mire, to get out of this suffering. Number one, we need the perspective, we need the wisdom.
Mm.
So that's what this book is as well, is even if you don't understand fully or you're not fully there, practical enlightenment for everyday life is the subtitle. So enlightenment is about freedom. It's about getting on the path. So once you start to read and even be aware of this information, because before so much of my suffering was I didn't know there was true self and ego. So I didn't know, I was kind of identifying with all of it. I didn't really understand that, there's this limited part and there's this expansive part. So I
And
think
the ego is the limited part. The thing that would be
yes,
screaming at me
that's
is my
right.
ego.
That's right. And I'll give you a simple practice in a moment, 90 seconds, where you can start to be aware. And then the second part is the experiential, like I said. So these practices doesn't mean you do them all day long, but even just starting with 5 to 7 minutes in the morning means you're not just tuning out all the time. Now you're balancing tuning out, doing, eating, preparing food, sending emails out here with some time to nurture and connect with this inner energy inside of you. And the third thing I want to say is that all this angst, all this anxiety, I get it because I was there too. And I used to be this anxious mess and I used to have insomnia. I used to have eating disorders. I had all of this. And so the way that we digest food and we metabolize food is a similar journey to how we also need to digest and assimilate and then let go of a lot of emotional energy that gets trapped inside of us. And
Mm.
that's a big subject of the book as well.
I mean, it's so good. And I really want to make sure we get to the numbers part of
Yes.
the book. It's a great
Oh,
part of the book.
and I love to share as well the sun moon practice about wholeness too, Molly,
There's
really
just so
quick.
much to talk
I was
about. You
just
know
so
what
much
I
to
mean,
talk about.
friend?
But
That's what
what
I'm
I'll
saying
say,
about the book. It's like you could really read like a little bit of that book like a year and go so deep into it. It's just what a wonderful thing. Read and reread and reread.
so imagine this, Molly, like moment to moment, I'm sitting here with you, right? And we say, that woman you mentioned, that's like, I don't really know what magnetism
Yeah,
is. I
that's
don't know
me,
how to
Kimberly.
change my life. Okay, so Molly, listen to me.
No,
In your
not me now. That's me
in
like
your
15 years
head,
ago.
this is not who we trust, right? The head, the mind chatter, which is the ego. Often
Yes.
over speaking, the ego tells us, oh, this sucks. Look at her. What's going on? Like, this is bullshit,
She doesn't understand
whatever.
you.
All the
Yeah,
chatter,
totally.
the,
Totally.
the wounds, the triggers, everything. So we don't trust the mind. So for this exercise, all you do is you drop down into your body, which doesn't have the same stories, and specifically into your heart.
Yeah.
And moment to moment, let's say for this podcast, when you're about to write an email, when you're with your kid, when you show up to a party, when you're in line at the drugstore, moment to moment, you check in with your heart and you ask yourself one singular question. Am I in true self right now, or am I in ego? And if
Mm.
you're in true self, which is our true nature, and remember, things will consistently start to line up more and more in your life when you are in this authentic you. What you'll feel in your heart specifically is this feeling of expansion. It's like how the universe and light is always expanding. That is your nature, to feel allness, to look around and to say, oh, great, I feel inclusive, I feel
Yeah.
compassionate, I feel loving, right? That's who we're meant to be. And more when we do these practices, that's who we line up to be. And then our behaviors match that. But in that moment, let's say you don't feel so good, Molly, let's say you just, you talk shit about someone, or you gossiped, or you made a comment, or you're
Or you
criticizing.
like binge ate, or you're isolated for 5. Let's go deeper. You're
Yeah,
isolated in your house for 7 days because you hate yourself so much. I mean, those are like
exactly.
my stories.
You're having trouble getting out of bed in the morning.
Yeah.
You're just, so what you go into your heart and what you'll feel is, okay, you'll feel on some level, somehow constriction, because that's what the ego is. It's smallness. It feels tight. It's the opposite of expansion. It just makes
Mhm.
you feel more and more compressed. So if you're feeling that, the first thing is you pause and you say, oh, I'm in ego right now. I'm
Is there
small.
another word that you ever use other than ego? It just feels so a little confused. I mean, I don't know, lower
You can
self I
say,
sometimes use.
You can say lower self. It's self with a little s. You could say pseudo soul.
Oh,
You could say the
pseudo soul. I'm here
false
for that.
self. Whatever words. Again, it doesn't really matter. But what you could say, I'm closed. I'm open. I'm in love,
Yeah.
or I'm not in love. Whatever it is.
Oh, I love that one. These are great.
So let's say you feel it and you called it out, you've identified it. What it means is now, and then we go into other practices like feeling your feet, feeling your body in this moment, taking 3 deep breaths, putting your hands on your lower belly, just coming back here, taking a walk, change your environment for a moment, go to the bathroom. But here's what you don't do when you know you're in that constricted place. You don't let a word come out. You don't vent to anyone. You don't send an angry email. You don't send an angry text. You don't walk around the world throwing off that love. You work to first break the pattern or recenter. And
Mhm.
some days it's easier than others. Sometimes you fully come back, maybe you don't. But this awareness that you're not embodying your true heart is going to create so much power and empowerment in your life because it's a framework, right? Now you know, okay, I'm off. So you do less, you spread less of that energy until you shift. And so much of the book is about realigning again, realigning, also metabolizing those emotions, like we
Mhm.
talked about, so that over time you feel like you're carrying around less and less heaviness. A block of wood, a block of ice is heavy. So these emotions that we haven't processed, for me, Molly, oh my gosh, I used to feel so much heaviness moment to moment. Dr. David Hawkins, whose work I also reference in the book, this amazing psychologist, he talks about getting to the bottom of the well. So that
Mhm.
means if we feel anger, if we feel real sadness, we feel real frustration, you lean into that, and it usually dissipates in 10 minutes or less without the mind chatter. And over time, we start to metabolize those emotions when we go through this process, getting out of the head, getting into the body, and we let that energy leave more and more. There's a real physicality to this too, Molly. This means food cravings start to dissipate. It means, oh, I have an easier time knowing when I'm hungry. I'm less controlled by food because I have the ability to self soothe myself beyond using this physical entity of food to try to soothe myself.
Yeah.
So your life starts to change more and more.
I think there's always, I mean, I always say that I do this almost anytime I do any kind of event. I mean, I think it's so important to be reminded that longing is a space that you can build off of, right? Anybody who's even listening to this podcast right now wants to get well. If you're in a
Yes.
dark place
Yes.
listening to this podcast, of even just by virtue of pressing play, there is a small part of you that wants what we're talking about. And then the rest is ego, the rest is fear, the rest is lower self, the rest is pseudo soul, the rest is, and I love, you know what I sometimes wish, though, in fairness, I do wish that my ego came like in a different voice, like Mickey Mouse. Do you know what I mean? And then I'd be like, oh, it's pseudo soul. I don't need to, it's just like it can feel so convincing. You can't do this. Come on. You're too tired. You can't get it. It's like,
Oh,
and it sounds exactly like me. And I'm like, holy cow.
and that's why the mind is tricky. And
Tricky.
you know what, Molly, when you said, hey, someone listening to this being like, I don't know what you're talking about, I will share too. And I share these stories in the book. About 4 years ago, I did hit my rock bottom place where, it's easy to kind of go in and out of practices and all of this. If you're in a good place, you're like, oh, I'll sleep in a couple more minutes, 10 minutes. I'm not going to meditate today. But when you are in rock bottom, it is your lifeline. It's like I can't breathe. I can't move through unless I have something to cling to, something that's going to help me. And so for me, 4 years ago, my mom passed away really suddenly.
I'm
It
so
was in
sorry.
6 weeks from when we found out she had cancer to when she was gone, and my son wasn't a year old.
Mm.
And then there was this waking up across my life of, oh my God, anything can really happen at any time because she was so healthy at Christmas.
Oh,
So then some months later, I ended up leaving that relationship I was in and moving out on my own, which I never thought would happen, right? So I'm new mom, lost my mom, become a single mom. And
Wow.
this was like, this is, all the feelings of this isn't fair, the anger, the sadness, the grief, it was all rolled into there. And what I did, Molly, was I took the advice of a monk that I met at the Self Realization Fellowship, which is Yogananda's meditation group organization. And he said, Kimberly, treat your home like an ashram for 5 months. This is
Mm.
before COVID, right? So before my self imposed isolation period. What I did, Molly, was I did these practices. I was doing them before, right? I've been doing them for like 10 years, but after that was when I really clung in and did them.
Yeah.
And I also went through thousands of pages of scripture. So we could say that is really the genesis of this book, because this, you are more than you think you are. I'm summarizing the Upanishads and the Gita, the New
Oh
Testament,
yeah, you're getting to all
Bible,
the big
Rumi,
you're getting to all the big ticket items in there.
big ticket items, and going
Yeah.
into this. And when I came out after 5 months, which was mainly meditation, I was taking care of my son, I was working, but I wasn't doing much else except really going in and nurturing myself. And what came out of that, Molly, was this rising up with one thing that was never there before: trust.
Mhm.
Trust, trust of life,
Yeah.
trust of the true self, trust of this, greater intelligence running through us and around us. And I knew that whatever was going on, I was prepared. This rising up of strength and trust inside of me came
Mhm.
from this inner connection. So that I was walking around in the world in a very different energy. I was whole. I was feeling connected to myself. I was confident. So that when I did, some months after that, walk into a random dinner party with 12 people, oh, there's my soulmate, John, my husband now. And it wasn't this arduous pushing. And so
Mhm.
much has unfolded from then. So I say, okay, rock bottom place, if you're feeling that, or pretty low, it's actually, it can be very helpful to you. It can be a tool, because then we can take that kind of feeling of real, stuck, stagnant energy, and then we can say, okay, here's something I can channel that into. And from that, we start to experience more opening, more freedom. Little by little, it starts to crack open, and then we rise from that place. And then the light starts to come through, and then woof,
But
Molly,
it
we can
sounds to me like
stronger.
you had a lot of seeds planted when you hit that rock bottom. I did too, by the way. And so you had a lot of the experience. You'd been around the world, you had met monks, you like sort of had a road guide as to like, okay, the sirens are coming and I gotta change my life right now. I think what happens, and I actually saw this yesterday in a retreat I ran, and this woman said, like, I don't even know where to find a teacher. So I have two questions about this, because I think, listen, I think change happens when you're most desperate. I've been a therapist for 20 years. No one ever comes to see me and says, hey, Molly, so my life's amazing. So good to see
Yeah.
you. Usually when someone comes to me, they're like, help me, please, the greatest prayer on earth, help me, help me. So I wonder about if somebody doesn't have any background in anything that you're talking about. And it is beautiful what you're saying. It's so important, because I always say this. We talk about what you're saying is, I learned how to trust the divine process. I learned how to trust something bigger. And people are like, don't you girls start talking about God. And we're not talking about God. But if you want to think about it, and you're deep in an eating disorder, or you're deep in an addiction, or you're deep in self-hate, that is the current government system that you are running by. And what Kimberly is suggesting to us is perhaps we upgrade our government system to something loving and trusting and internally, like, truly who we are. So my two questions are, what if I have no base of any of this? And so some of what we're saying is like, gosh, guys, this seems really advanced. But here's the other one, which I think you're going to have a great answer for. I should know it in my soul. What about these people who are like, good for you, Kimberly. You got to be a monk and have a baby. Well, I have two jobs and what about these people saying, I don't have time? I'm
Yeah.
interested to hear what you have to say to them.
Okay. So, number one is, the reason I get so excited about talking about this stuff is it's actually, it's simple. It's profound. It doesn't mean it's easy, but there is a simplicity to this work and to this book. And I think that one of my gifts, Molly, is that I take big concepts and I make them palatable for people. So that beauty detox solution was taking all of digestion and all the different complexity. And I broke it down into these analogies, which people really understood. So they started to understand their body. And so, like I said, I went through thousands of pages and really getting deep into Kriya yoga and all of this so that it's simple for people. And what we're talking about here is energy. Really, it's like working with energy in a bigger way. And what Yogananda says, these are unifying principles of
across,
energy.
like they work across the board.
They work.
Absolutely.
It just is. It is what it is. So you read these texts now, and then some of the commentaries I have now have all these footnotes with quantum physics. And it's like my book, there's all this supportive science. You can see this isn't woo-woo, but you can see that there's a lot of support here. So we're not talking about religion. We're not talking about, a specific way. We're talking about, wow, this is how I open up energy. Frequencies line up. This is just how, again, science now works. This is how energy works. Language is an interesting thing. We can say universe, you can say source, we can say God, and don't let the words, make you stumble if none of the, some of those don't resonate with you. Really, it's about energy. It's about connection that runs through all things. So
and
that's
I love
the
this
first
idea that it's about trust. Like my mentor always says, like the opposite of trust is control. And how well is you trying to control and manage your life, like working? I mean, I don't know. Anytime I'm in the opposite of trust, I'm like lonely, hopeless. And then when I'll switch into trust and, leveling up, I'm like, oh God, it's so much better up here.
Yeah. Control means that we don't trust life. So we're trying to manipulate everything to feel safe. And so the real antidote is, where does safety really live? If you're trying to control everything out here, I'm doing everything. I'm not going to get COVID. I'm going to do this and this. The problem is we can't control everything. So trust comes when you have real unshakable, or growing towards unshakable self-confidence in this inner resource, in this part of you that you can count on, what Yogananda calls the infallible counsel of the inner voice, the voice of the heart, the voice of the intuition. When we develop this connection, it means we trust that whatever happens in life, all the infinite things that happen, we have the resource, we have the strength to rise up to it. So the second part of your question is like, oh, good for you. I share these parts of my story to show that we all have the same struggles. It may look a little differently, but we're all struggling with the mind. We're all struggling with the ego or the false self and all the ways in which it keeps us small and limited. And so,
and I want to say, I meant it more that, when people are in my experience, when people are in a very dark space, they'll look for differences and not similarities. Right. And so they'll say, well, Kimberly can do it because she had all this time and I don't have time. I mean, I think everybody has time, and I think we make time for the things that are important to us, but I wonder what you think about that. So I wasn't actually saying that in a,
oh yeah, no, I get what you're saying though. I think that all the ways that we create, reasons that something can't work for us is the scared ego saying, well, I don't want to try because what if this doesn't work again, or whatever it is. And our relationship with time, for instance, as just one example, can profoundly shift. I have two small children, 18 months old and 5 years. I run a business. I have my podcast, the Feel Good Podcast. I write books. So if I can do these practices and have a completely different experience in my life, anyone can do it. I will say that it does take work, but, and here's the big but, it's not necessarily more work than someone's doing. It's a shift in focus. So for instance, my morning practice, like I said, I'll make hot water with lemon. I'll make my green smoothie. And then I sit here. You can't see it, Molly, but right next to this podcast equipment is my meditation seat. And my team knows, don't book anything, don't do anything till I'm done meditating. That's the boundary that I've created. And what does that mean? Yes, I put aside time to meditate, but now there's more flow to my day. I'm more, I sit down and I write an article, whatever it is. There's just more flow. There's more easefulness. There's more harmony.
It's like you're more available to yourself. I love that.
Yeah, there's just less pushing and less arduousness. So yes, we're doing the practice. It takes some attention, but then so much opens up. Like there's just it's amazing how much is going on right now. And I don't feel chaotic. I feel full with life, but I do feel, I keep using this word flow because it's like this inner guidance. Everything isn't like feeling like it's going to crashing down.
I love what you're saying. I mean, I also want to note to anybody who is like balking at this, please stay with us because like we love you. And also like I don't know. Like a lot of people spend a lot of time like scrolling, and a lot of people spend a lot of time like complaining. And I think you're really keyed into something where we don't get a guarantee when we're trying a new practice. Like we don't get a guarantee that it's going to work. Like Molly and Kimberly can sit here and say like, listen, this is going to change your life. If you want a better life, getting connected to the deepest, most profound parts of you is really the way to go. It's not, we
Yeah.
don't think that. That's just what the teachings have been since the beginning of time. Like we're talking about the oldest prescriptions on earth right
Yes.
now. Like before there was Zoloft, there was this, what we're talking about here.
And Molly, that's why I'm so passionate about this, is because we get caught up in the new stuff, right? Like the new drug, the new study, the new biohacking tool.
Oh,
And that's
yes.
fun, but there's so much value in the old.
Ain't
And this
it?
is the ancient, like the really, really old
Yeah,
stuff.
like breath and sitting quietly. Like you can't really sell that. You know what I mean? It's like, wow, mind blown. It's like, not really. They've been doing it forever and ever and ever. But what do
Well,
you say to somebody? Like, what do you say? Because I think you're really right, at least for the people who I know are listening to this, a lot of fear about it not working, or, and they have don't have a lot of frustration tolerance that it takes to do some of the stuff you're talking about. Like, what do you say to that?
so I'll say that feel how your life is right now, right? And I do not believe in coincidences, Molly. I do
Me
believe in
neither.
this term that Deepak says, which is interesting. Deepak is synchrodestiny. So I think anybody listening to this right now is meant to listen to this.
Same
And
here. I double down on that. Both of the host and the guest really believe you're exactly where you're supposed to be right now.
And so what I would say, sorry, Molly, what was your question?
My question is, because I think you're really right to say that most people are not doing it because they're like, oh, I don't think it's going to work.
The fear. Yes.
There's no way it's
So
going to
I'll
work.
say, if you feel your life right now, and it's not exactly where it's meant to be, what I will say is that the solution to the problem is not found where the problem is. So if you look
I
at your
love that
life
one.
and you're like, I'm doing my best, but I don't have a lot of time, and it's like the same pattern that's acting out in your life. What I'm telling you is that there is a different way. There is a different potential that you can start to ignite and create in yourself. And this is a yogic science. So back to these ancient texts, there's so much value in this information for modern day, which is why I couldn't let it go, Molly. I couldn't just let most people
I
bypass
like
it.
that about you. I'm like that too. I'm just like an
Thousands.
annoying gnat until you
Yeah.
listen, you know?
Yeah. Like
And I'm
this is
proud of it.
this is it. Like I dug deep to find these, and to offer them in a way that was accessible and, again, practical. And what I'm saying is that this is experiential. So as you go through and you spend just a few moments, like we were saying in that practice, maybe a lot of the time you were like thinking or whatever, but even if there's just that glimmer, that one micro moment where you started to feel stillness and you started to feel expansion, that's the beginning. That is the seed.
Yeah.
It's not going to be the full meditation. You feel that all the time, especially in the beginning. It's not going to be like everything, but you go through and you find, oh my gosh, in this practice, I got this awareness. I got this download. I'm getting it. So those little nuggets of awareness growing, that grows freedom in your life, this freedom of this untapped potential, instead of being, dulled down, watered down, made to fit into the same little pattern of your life every day. You start to expand that energy, and then it grows more and more. And the next thing you know, in a month, in a week, couple of months, you look back and you're like, wow, this bliss really grew in my life just by doing this. Oh my gosh, I feel so much more love.
I know in my own meditation practice, and I started transcendental meditation, not because my life was good. I started it because I had to buy a bigger spiritual car, because the car I was driving wasn't big enough anymore. And my life needed a bigger spiritual car. And I actually think for me, when I started doing meditation, just being able to sit with some of the violence of my head and not avoid it, and then let that just sort of be what it was, just took all the power out of my mind. It's and then I could sort of say oh, wow, maybe I could be happy. I was at a real, I was like, well, maybe it wasn't necessarily for me, and everybody has different experience. It wasn't like a bliss point, but it was oh, today I hate myself a little less, and I can feel that. And then slowly it was oh, wait, maybe I'm not a terrible person. And it was oh, wait, maybe I'm awesome. And now I'm hashtag goddess, most
Ah,
days.
oh, let me, can I go into that a little bit, Molly? It's really
Yes,
interesting what
do
you
it.
just said. So back to what I said earlier about learning to work with energy is really powerful. So in a very simplistic sense, let's go back to digestion. Let's say you eat an apple, right? You are meant to assimilate the nutrients and let go of the rest, and the fiber and everything else that we don't utilize gets pooped out. So there's this flow of taking in and letting go. And that's how energy is meant to work in our life. It comes in, it goes out.
It doesn't
People come
stick to
in.
our bones, is what
That's
you're
right.
saying.
So when we get bloated, let's say something happens, and I won't go into this whole big thing, but bloating is basically when something breaks down prematurely, so the gases are released up higher in the GI tract, so we feel wider and bigger and ugh. So imagine in life, things are supposed to come in and go out, situations, people say something, somebody says something, you perceive it with your senses, and then I'll take that, or I'll let that go, and then it just flows along and along. The problem is we have been taught in all the different ways, from childhood, from our wounds, being raised by imperfectly perfect people as well, who are
Yeah.
doing their best.
Mhm.
Instead of all this energy coming in and out, energy comes in, and then we have all these unprocessed emotions and feelings, and it sticks, or it hits, it reminds us of something, and we kind of hold on. We hold on to that resentment. We hold on. We get angry for a while, or we just don't feel good. And so the energy isn't coming and going anymore. The energy is creating all these the spiritual bloating, so to speak, blockages,
I
the
love spiritual
restlessness,
bloating. Can you write that
right?
down? That needs to go in your next book.
I think I mentioned it somewhere in this book, but it's just the way that we're dealing with energy. And so what we realize is that in effective meditation, and this book, we do that expanding the gaps process. And then there's 3 subsequent chapters of this kind of deep, deep Vedic way of connecting to the true self in meditation. So meditation isn't just relaxing the senses, because then we're just still out here. It's about union. It's about going into central nervous system, into spine and brain, and waking up different parts, especially our medulla oblongata, this ganglion of nerves at the brainstem at the back of the head. And so now we start to concentrate our energy, and now it's in here. So we work with it in a more powerful way, and we're less susceptible to, again, all the reactions, all the attachments, all the likes and dislikes. So that over time, coupled with the other exercises of processing what's in there, energy comes, energy goes. We don't have a big story attached to it.
Yeah.
We
Well,
see a
that's the whole
post.
point,
That's it.
right?
That's what keeps us
Drop
down.
the story.
That's what keeps us angry, Molly. That's what keeps
Mhm.
us in fear, because of all the stuff that
Mhm.
happens in the past, we project to the future. So the way that we keep lightening up our life is we start learning again a totally different relationship with energy, whether it's, words, what people say, just people in general, anything coming in, it comes in, we perceive it. We don't believe it. We don't believe our mind chatter stories. We let it go. We stay in this really beautiful, powerful place of equanimity and centeredness. We establish our connection with our true self, and we stay focused. And life really does change, because, oh my gosh, I look back at myself, Molly, all the ways like somebody would say, oh, can I share one thing that people used
Yeah.
to really say? Oh my gosh. Okay. So through this work, I realized I used to get so mad when someone would interrupt me, like really
Oh,
mad
I'm glad
inside
you're
of
not like that anymore, because we have to be friends and I answer.
Oh, no. No, it was like someone would interrupt me, or someone wouldn't agree with me. So let's say I went on this big thing I was passionate about. In the end, someone like, don't think so. So then I started digging into that. Like, what is this pattern? Because all our patterns are information. Like, all of this out here, we can start to dissect. So what I learned in these exercises, and there's one particular I share in the book, I went under that. And what I found under that, Molly, was, oh, the interrupting, the not agreeing, it hits on something in me that makes me feel like I'm not good enough to be seen or heard.
Ooh.
Stuff from my childhood. Oh, that's why they're interrupting. They don't think I'm good enough to be heard. And then underneath that was this fear, this really deep fear that I wasn't lovable. And that's
Mhm.
why I wasn't seen and heard. So it was like this revelation, not just getting it like a therapist saying it to me, but really seeing it, feeling it, touching it inside of me, like this open wound. And then I saw it. Oh my gosh, like the healing. Then I started to work with healing that within myself. And I can see myself. I can hear myself.
Yeah.
I can self soothe. I don't need people to agree with me. I don't need this validation. So then when I started to heal that within myself, so much started to open up. It was like layers of an onion. And so this whole big root fear not good enough, right? Has started to heal a lot in my life. I'm not gonna say I'm fully there because I think we're all works in progress, but the freedom that gave me, the power, the way that I show up, it's helped me create and manifest so much more, including that soulmate love. When I
Mhm.
started to believe that I was lovable, it came up from inside of me. And that's a whole other subject, the way
Yeah,
that we
well, I'm
approach
reminded
love.
of one of my teacher, Marsha Linehan, who created dialectical behavioral therapy. And she talks about, comparison, and, she and many others always says, the only person you really can compare yourself to is yourself. Right. So I love what, it's like, I think about if I was sitting here and just saying, well, I'm not as good, is where I go, my own childhood stuff. And it's like, but if I sit and think about, well, year over year, I've really
Yeah.
moved towards who I think not only who I want to be, but I think who the divine wants, who I'm really supposed to be. And I always like this idea of like the idea that we're calling these practices. And like, I don't know about you. I went axe throwing on Thursday, and I was terrible at it when I first started. And then I axe threw for 90 minutes. And by the end of axe throwing, you know, I was like okay at it. But if I had just judged my
Yeah.
ability to axe throw off of the first time I threw an axe, which is sort of what we're saying here. It's like, if you're like, well, I can't do it. It's like, well, then you definitely can't do it. Life's a disease of perception. But if like, what would it be like? Here's what I always think. Like, what would it be like if you were listening to a Kimberly saying and you just took a few notes from what she's saying and you tried it, and you tried it for like some time? Let's say like, I like 66 days because that's when your brain gets automacy, right? Like that's like the first time your brain's like, oh, cool, I'll do this again. And then at 67 days, if it's not working, then go back to your misery. Like it's cool. It'll always be there for you. Like the ego's just like sitting there waiting. Like the ego's like, yeah, great. Come on, let's go bingy. Come on, let's go hurt ourselves, whatever. Like, but what if it's possible? What if it's possible that you
Well,
can feel more bliss, that you can have more intuition by doing these practices?
yeah. And also, I want to say, Molly, that everybody listening to this is an intelligent adult human
Right.
being, right? And so think about if we believe that all there is what we see with our physical eyes. That would mean, well, how are we having this podcast right now? Right. Because there's
Right.
sound waves that we tune into. There's all these like internet, like all these things. There's energy. There's things going on beyond, this cup. The reason I see it is like there's a denseness to
Mm-hmm.
this. Right. So there's like less dynamic movement, but everything is energy underneath. So what we're saying is that don't go to the solution isn't where the problem is, meaning when you're
Mm.
working on things that are just what you see, they're already formed. So what we're talking about is going into energy underneath before it
I love
becomes
that. I love the
form
solution is not
the
where the
inside.
problem is. I feel like,
Yes, we have to
oh,
try a different way,
nothing.
right?
Well, they say in the 12 steps, like nothing changes, nothing changes. Like it's so,
That's
and
right.
like I think that's it. And I just always like to remind people, like going back to your miseries, like kind of like it's not that hard. Like if for some
Yeah,
reason what we're saying, you try, like if you're miserable, like what's the harm in trying something new? That's not really that new. That's
yeah.
the oldest form of healing that exists in many ways, right?
There is another way. And that is why, again, I'm so passionate about sharing this, because I think that the ways that we suffer have been around since the beginning of time. It's
Mhm.
just that
Oh,
we're in
I
a different
love that.
culture. We're in a different society, but from the beginning, these rishis, and I love this term because it's Sanskrit for seer,
Mm.
real seer. Like we're seeing, third eye is this energy center, this chakra between our two physical eyes and higher. And this is where we focus when we meditate, and we can see, meaning we perceive more wisdom, more understanding, beyond just this physical. So if we want to just live in this dense physical world and what we see, and that's where we compare, Molly. It's like we're always
Mhm.
looking on social media, we're looking what other people look like, then we're comparing it back, reflecting it back to ourselves. And when we go into this, these tools and practices and techniques, what we're saying is we're connecting not to this dense physical, but the energy underneath, the energy of us.
Yep.
And let me tell you something, the confidence chapter, Molly, one of my
Mhm.
favorite chapters, it goes into like the difference.
Mine is the self-forgiveness chapter, but we can talk about that on another podcast.
Well, I just want to say quickly that there's true confidence and there's surface confidence. And surface
Mm.
confidence is always going to be reflected back to us from the outer world. So, oh, how many people liked my post today? Or, oh, look at me in the mirror. Looks like I'm having a good hair day. Or I'm confident because this is what my stock price is today. I'm a, tech entrepreneur, whatever it is, something out here. Or for me, when I was obsessed with
Or my
grades,
weight, right?
my
Exactly.
weight, what is coming up on the scale,
Yep.
right? It's all confidence out here. The problem is that's always moving and fluctuating in the outside world, it's
And it's
external.
relying on external factors that you can't control.
Cannot. So where is our confidence supposed to come from? So in the very basis sense, Molly, let's say we go deep, 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 like layers of an onion. What I wrote in the book, there's this line, this powerful line from history where Moses asked the Almighty, what is it? What are you? What is this? One line, I am that I am. So think about that. I am that I am.
What do you think it means?
So what it means, I'm here. I am an alive, breathing, unique creation of spirit. So I'm here. This is where my confidence comes from, Molly. I'm here. You're here.
Yeah.
We're here. Right. So
The
just feel the
fire,
bigness,
fire
feel
inside.
the freedom of that. I am just me. I'm showing up. And then all the other stuff's going to line up, all the things. But the confidence, when we connect to this and we arrive unapologetically, not little on me. Oh, sorry. Da, da, da. No, you arrive with this knowing I have a gift. I have a purpose. I'm here. I'm a creation of spirit. And guess what? So are you. And so are you. We can't compare ourselves. That's ridiculous. Right. You can't compare energy. But here we are. And so from this deep place of connection that we create our best stuff, Molly. And this is where peace is.
And I think it's, but I think it's safe to say, because this is my own stuff, hearing this doesn't happen overnight. It's not like that's what I want to say to you. Like, this is Kimberly's like 10 years of work.
No, but I will say this. Say it. 1 degree over. Yes. And I feel like, again, that's my purpose. That's why I've been through all this stuff, Molly.
I'm here for it. I am here for it.
Thousands of pages I've synthesized in this book. I will say that, again, it goes back to experiential knowing. There's no blind dogma here. There's no believe us. It's experiential. So I can almost guarantee that if anyone reads this book, something in it will spark, will speak, right? Because it's going back to what we know about ourselves. And I will say that it doesn't happen overnight, but again, it's about getting on the path in the first place. The Bhagavad Gita is emphatic in this. One of the greatest blessings of human experience is, number one, we're born into the human body. And number two, we find a pathway, we find a guru, we find teachings, we find truth, we have access. And a lot of this is buried in all these dense books. So just by reading it and bringing it into your energy field, it's going to start to shift things. And then number three, 5 minutes, 7 minutes, it's not that much time you need to do to start activating this energy. You start to open it up, you start to shift your energy. And again, you will start to notice big changes in your life.
And I think there are beautiful meditations in the book. And I think there are simpler ways to that, of just sitting down quietly. But we're talking about the most primal prescriptions, which is sit quietly and breathe. And then there's lots of other more advanced stuff. But I think actually I love what we're talking about here. Cause I love Kimberly's book, but even if you didn't buy Kimberly's book and you just sat down and sat with yourself for 90 seconds and then 3 minutes, something will change, even just in making that commitment that you want to do that. Yeah. I've been waiting all day to ask you this question.
Okay. No.
Well, I've actually been waiting for a few weeks to ask you this question, because it's the question I ask everybody on the show, but I was most excited to hear your answer to it.
Okay.
Because what you're craving, you're like a bated breath. Well, because what you're craving is, about the underlying issues between, behind eating disorders, addictions, and all sorts of that. And so the question is what do you think we're really craving?
We're craving the deep, deep connection of the true self, which is this, again, this energy inside of you, this beautiful, courageous, this is the potential of who you are. And so what we're craving is living life from this place, allowing this part of you to rise up in you and out of you, to live a big, full life, fulfilling peace, contentment. It is possible. It's just a little bit of a difference in where you're identifying, where you're putting your full energy. What we're craving is this, hands down, Molly. No mistaking. We are meant to live in this full potential, not smallness. We're meant to live with self, capital S, true self.
I love that. And I love the word boom is right. Cause I love the word fulfill. It's we know, they say that I've heard that like substance use and eating disorder is like a low level search for divinity, right? It's and what you're saying
Feeling
is that
we're
we're
hungry.
looking, right.
Yeah,
We are hungry, right? And
we're
like, what would
hungry.
it be like to fulfill like on a higher, I mean,
No, no,
yeah,
we're hungry, Molly. So we're stuffing things in, trying to feel a sense of fullness and a sense of connection. So food becomes that low level. You said that very easy go to because it's physical and we pick it up, but on a much deeper level. And this is for me because I had eating disorders and I understand that warped relationship with food. But then when we go to this place, it heals all, all that surface stuff because this is the connection I have always been craving and I didn't know what it was.
I am here for that. I identify with that across the board. I had no idea that there was something so much bigger, more expansive, more loving than that low level stuff that I was just thinking was the best I could do. You
Yes.
know, just thought that was
Amazing.
the best I could do. Oh, every minute, every minute. I knew it. Thank you so much for joining us today. I hope
Oh,
everybody kept their minds open. And if you didn't, just go listen again.
thank you so much, Molly. It's been
Thank
such a
you.
pleasure and I love our
Uh,
very special
Me,
connection.
me too. And I love your book. So thanks for coming on today.
Thank you, my love.